I'm Jonathan Weinberg, and this is Drawing with Fountain Pens. You don't need to be someone who draws with fountain pens to get something out of this channel. I write with fountain pens, and I love to talk about them and art and design. As always, if you find this video useful, please remember to subscribe. It's free and it's the way to support this channel. Today is December 26th, and it's the end of the year when everybody is doing their best of and reviewing the past year. In truth, I'm not a big fan of best of. I don't go to parties where people watch the Academy Awards.
The winner is Miss Vicki Lester.
Norman with you.
And also, I don't want to do something where I focus on the worst pens.
Wrong house.
No, the right house.
I didn't get
We want to talk to Marilyn Heck. Marilyn
did.
Heck and trash.
didn't
What a
get
juxtaposition.
nominated.
We know that. And what happened?
What
But the
was
important
that?
thing is people, if you get close to being nominated, that's what it's all
It's
about.
all right.
But what I would like to do is sort of just look over some of the highlights of the year and talk about those pens that really have been a great pleasure for me and celebrate those pens and some of the pen makers. As I go over some of the high points, keep in mind that almost in every case I have done longer videos about these pens, and which I encourage you to go look at. I think I have like something like 100 videos, so they're so you can get a better sense of what these pens are like. I'm just going to touch on some of the ones that I've enjoyed. Now, since this channel is all about art and pens, I'm going to just start with some of the smaller makers and pens that are really custom-made pens or made in very small batches. Top of this list is the Ghost pen. That was a collaboration of two friends. One, a very old friend, Jinhao Odin, who's a wonderful artist and picture book maker, illustrator, and he collaborated with Sean Newton, who he introduced me to, but who I was aware of because of his wonderful charity in which he raises money to give to school kids. Anyway, which I strongly recommend people check out. Now, the pen came out in late October, just in time for Halloween. It has a spooky kind of theme, and it features an incredibly beautiful custom designed clip, which is why it was quite expensive, because Sean didn't make the clip himself. I mean, he designed the elements for it, and then it was made by a jeweler. So it makes it very special. And the clip is based on old American tombstones. And it really is a beautiful pen. In March, I went to the Baltimore Pen Show, and there I was starstruck because I met Jonathan Brooks, who is probably the most successful and well-known of makers of resin blanks, acrylic resin blanks for fountain pens. And you can, what's the great thing is these pen shows, you can buy the pen directly from him. He has really dozens of different models that he displays in front of him, and the hard part is deciding which one you like or which few that you like. You can buy, he makes pens himself, or his company, Caroline Pen Company, makes pens that he creates. So I think it's really cool to buy a pen directly from him, and then right there he tunes the nib. So they use Jovo, standard Jovo nibs, but when the nib is tuned, it really writes really beautiful, and it's nice to talk with him, to meet his daughter. Anyway, that was a great sort of high point. I I've been to 2 pen shows and bought pens from him, and I'm looking forward to continue to do that. I mean, you can get, that's a rabbit hole in and of itself. You could end up just collecting Jonathan Brooks pens, not just the pens he makes, but his blanks appear are used in so many different pens. Pens as different as pens made by Leonardo and Visconti and Navilar. But I think it's great to just get his pen, that he's designed. Another pen maker that I met at very briefly at the Washington D.C. show was Adolphus Smith at Derail Penz, and by far the pen that I bought from him is the cutest pen. It also uses a number 6 nib, but it's really different from other pens, and for some reason reminds me of pajamas. So I think it's adorable, but it actually feels beautiful in the hand. And the other thing that's terrific about it is how perfectly he designed it, made it so that it lines up. You could have this pattern and the cap and the bottom might not fit perfectly, or the way the lines lines up, but he really makes sure that it all fits together very nicely. And it was under, I think it was around $170, which is expensive, but not, I think, for something which is like work of art, it's really a great deal. So I was really thrilled to see it. Immediately when I saw it at the pen show, I fell in love with it and knew that I had to get one. Now, the reality is that most people don't want to spend hundreds of dollars on pens, right? They're used to buying pens that you can buy for $3 or $4, a pen, and then throwing it away or not caring about it. So, you enter the Chinese pens, which are becoming more and more, I think, successful. They're better made than they used to be. And if you look at reviews online for fountain pens, they're beginning to dominate that because so many people are interested and want to know which ones to buy and are they worth it and how do they compare with more expensive pens. And I've done some of those reviews. So what stands out? Well, definitely, I think if we're thinking about pens of the year in Chinese pens, the Jinhao 82 pens are really appealing. They are really cute. They're small, as everyone points out. They're similar to sailor pens, but you can get 3 or 4 of them in bundles on Amazon for well under $20. So each pen ends up being maybe $6 or $7. And again, you could get them on eBay. And the parts of the pens are kind of interchangeable. So if you buy a bunch of them different colors, you can make your own versions of the pen. The problem with a lot of Chinese pens, and particularly the Jinhao 82s, is that the nib is not very good. But they're so inexpensive that I recommend that you just swap the nib out if you love the pen and get a Jovo nib from Goulet Pens or another company that sells them. And then you have a really good pen that writes really well and is very inexpensive. Now, the other Chinese pens that have sort of been reviewed almost to death is for example, the Jinhao 9019 that is called the Daho, I guess. I have reviewed that one myself. It's an enormous pen. It uses a number 8 nib, and so wild about it, to tell you the truth. I mean, it looks something like a Pilot, I think, Emperor pen, and it is huge, and the nib is kind of cool looking, but actually the nib doesn't write that great, I thought. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not great, and you can't exchange it because you can't trade it or swap it out because you can't get a number 8 nib that'll fit exactly in the same way. So, I suppose maybe you could somewhere, but they're not easily available and not inexpensive. So I wasn't overwhelmed by it. I think the X159, Jinhao X159, which uses a number 6 nib and is about the same size as the Mont Blanc 149, is a much better choice because, again, you can, if you don't like the nib that you get, you can swap it out. The nibs actually do now come in medium. Now that's a big difference in Chinese pens. They used to just be like fines and extra fines, but now you can get a medium, and I don't like writing with an extra fine or a fine, so that's a good thing. I wish they came in broads, and now you're beginning to see some of the Chinese pens even have stub nibs that you can get. A particularly good Chinese pen that I was really impressed with, and I love to write with, is the Moon Man or Moon John P136, which is kind of an emulation or even a clone of the Mont Blanc 146, which I think is a very good size. It's not as big as the 149, but it's very comfortable, cigar-shaped pen. This is a piston filler. The X159, unlike the Mont Blanc, uses a converter or a cartridge, but this one is a piston filler and even has an ink window, so it is much closer to its Mont Blanc inspired pen, so it's much closer to the Mont Blanc, but it's very, very nice pen. Asvine also has been making really beautiful pens. I've reviewed the V126, but they have a whole line of different pens. The V126 is a vacuum filler and is really trying to emulate, I think, the Pilot Custom 823. Now, it has a very nice smooth nib. I would say very comparable to a Jovo nib, medium nib. It's not a kind of nib like the Pilot Custom 823, which is just, one of the most smoothest, most beautiful nibs that you can have on a pen. So, it's giving you an experience which I think is very nice. It's under $30. It's terrific value. But, I don't think Pilot should worry about the competition. It really is aimed after people who don't want to spend hundreds of dollars, but have a really wonderful fountain pen experience. So I'm all for this. So far, I've been talking about pens with metal nibs that really do not have any flex to them at all. They write smoothly. I think they're nice to draw with, but they're nothing terribly special about them, right? They're pretty standard. What do I use to draw with? Well, the truth is that I'm still using pretty much the same pens that I used in 2022. And that includes the Pilot 743 and the Pilot 912 or my vintage Waterman 52. In terms of affordability, I'm a big fan of the Fountain Pen Revolution metal Ultraflex nibs, as long as you get them with ebonite feed and using one of their Himalaya pen that has the ebonite feed. That's very affordable. When they're on sale, you can get something like that for around $40 or so. And I think those are really great deals, and I think they flex, and if that's what you want, I think they work really, really well. They also have, I think, very good customer service. So if you do have a problem with the pen, they will make it right. So I think it's another great thing about Fountain Pen Revolution. The other thing is you can experiment and put their nibs onto other pens. The Opus 88, for example, is a pen, their demonstrator pen that will take a Fountain Pen Revolution nib, and so you can experiment with that. The new pen from them that I got, or new nib I got from them, is they introduced a 14K Flex nib that is a little more bouncy, a little more flexy. I'm not quite sure if it's worth the extra $100, but for around $150, you're getting a pen with a 14K nib that flexes. And there really isn't anything that affordable that works in the same way, I think. I have heard now that there is a pen offered by a company called Magna Carta that is being sold both on their website and through people like Goulet Pens, and people are very positive about their nibs. But I wonder, that's also an Indian nib, has our Fountain Pen Revolution. They're both companies that import pens from India, and I wonder how the two compared. I haven't seen anybody comparing the Fountain Pen Revolution gold nib with the Magna Carta gold nib. But I note that the fountain pen Revolution's solution is well under $200, while Magna Carta is spending, it costs you $350 to buy one of their pens with a nib. In terms of nibs, so many pens use the same Jovo or Bach nibs, and the nib is the most important part of a pen, arguably. For that reason, it's very exciting that Sean Design, that designs beautiful pens, came out with their own special nib, the Monoch nib, which has its own kind of design. Instead of grafting a point or a ball onto the metal of a nib, so there are really two different pieces to it, Sean Design makes their nib out of one piece of very hard metal, and it wraps around in a design that is reminiscent of some of the designs of the 50s that Schaefer did. Lami had a nib on their Persona pen that was a little bit like that. I think Visconti had a nib that was a little bit like that. But it's unique, the Sean Design nib. And I found it very nice to not just write with, but to draw with. A bit broad, but I like broad pens and very expressive and wet. I wasn't, in the end, using the pen that I bought with it, that came with it. I wasn't thrilled with that, the metal pen that came with it. I felt that the section is too short, and also I found it uncomfortable to use it. Threads are a bit sharp. I note now that in the beginning you had to buy it with some kind of pen body, but now they are selling the nibs separately, and you can put them on other pens. Now the great thing is that I discovered that the Monoch nib will go onto an Opus demonstrator, which is a wonderful pen, holds tremendous amount of ink. So that's a really great solution for me, at least, using that nib. And I'm sure there are other pens bodies that Sean Design makes that would work well with the Monoch nib. So kudos for them doing that. Now, in terms of design, what design is my favorite of 2023? And I have to say I'm really in love with another pen designed by Sean Newton called the Prospector. It has a very minimal look. But it's actually a complex shape that has a triangular bottom and top, but transitions into a round shape when it gets to the nib. I wonder if Sean was looking at the Almus 360 triangular pen, which is a kind of legendary classic pen, very expensive if you can get one used. And I also know that there's a pen that a German Reform company created in, I believe, in the 60s and 70s as actually in some ways more similar shape. The Almus pen is triangular throughout, but the German pen actually starts as a triangle and becomes a circle. But neither of these pens are created on a lathe by hand the way that Sean does it. And it's just remarkable to me that he can create what seems like such a perfect shape, so smooth, so wonderful in the hand, and do that all by himself by hand without, mass producing it and using, producing it in a mold. It has a 1.1 stub nib on it. I mean, when you get a pen from Sean, he will put whatever kind of Jovo nib you want to put into it, whatever size, and he tunes it to make sure that it writes beautifully. And if anything's wrong with it, you just contact him and he'll make it right. And he guarantees it for life. So if there's any problems, you can send it back to him as well. So it's nice working with somebody who and is so accessible and is such a great person in terms of the money that he raises. I think he's raised over $50,000 for scholarships for high school students. My other two favorites are not at all original, so let's call them classics. I got a stainless steel version of the Lami 2000, which is just a stunning looking pen. The Lami 2000 is one of my favorite pens, and the black material that the original comes in is, at the time, a kind of space age material, is very light and wonderful in the hand. But the look of the pen is somewhat marred, I think, by the shift from the silver to the black. But the stainless steel version is all one thing, and it just makes it so lovely and dynamic and pleasing in design, even if it's not quite as comfortable to hold. It still has the same incredibly gorgeous nib that writes so writes so perfectly, so wonderfully, as the original Lami 2000. So it's a beautiful pen. And finally, in September, I got yet another Pelikan M800. What drew me to that is not just the fact that it's blue rather than green, but that it had originally a double broad nib, which was modified by the legendary John Monoch into an italic nib. So it writes just fantastically and makes my handwriting look so beautiful. I have to say, I'm not sure if I only had one M800 that I would let anybody change it. But since I already had one, and I doubt I would have wanted a double broad, I was glad to have this experience with a slightly different pen, and also it was a great deal. All my pens are always a great deal, but it was much less than what a new Pelikan M800 would be, and I think it's great having sort of two experiences. I think the original M800 that I have, which actually is a 90s model, is my favorite pen that I own. But I would put this new, or in quotes new, because it's probably around 10 years old, M800 with the John Monoch modification in my top 10 pens that I own. I own now probably, oh my God, people always ask me that, probably around 400 pens. So the Pelikan is up there on the top, in terms of best pens, and probably every year that's what I'm going to end up saying. I know that Doug at Inquiring Minds recently was going on and on about how the M800 is also his favorite, and how it's very hard to sort of put your finger on what makes it so wonderful. It's just the right size. The nib writes so beautifully and smoothly. The piston there's no problem with it. It's a perfect pen. It seems like the perfect pen, and so many people have said that. It's expensive, but you feel as if it's actually worth it. That it's not about impressing people. It's not a pen that you have just to show, oh, what a fancy pen you have. It doesn't look, it doesn't overwhelm you with how expensive looking it is. Interestingly, Pelikan has a larger pen, the M1000, and I do have that one. And I think it's too big. It also writes very beautifully. It's a nice pen, but it's too big. And I feel the M600 is a little too small, and definitely when you get down to the M200 or M400, they're too tiny. I think for me, I like all of these pens, but I think the M800 is exactly right. It's the Goldilocks of their pens.
Breakfast. Oh, that's too hot. I'll put some milk on this one. Oh, wow, that makes it too cold. This one looks just right.
So that's it. That's my wrap up for 2023. I think we've all had an interesting year, but it's been a difficult year. I don't know how I would have made it through this year without journaling and my fountain pens. I know it may seem crazy to talk about something that is seemingly so minor as fountain pens, but I think fountain pens have kept me sane through the unhappiness and difficulty and the struggle of dealing with the world as it is right now. And I'm hoping that 2024 is going to be a terrific year. I wish everyone well.